only one in the United States. This designation is not just a badge of honor, but a testament to Detroit's rich legacy of architectural excellence and its ongoing commitment to building a future that is as vibrant and dynamic as its storied past. Detroit has long been a leader in shaping the way we live, work, and create. Today, we come together to explore how we can continue this legacy and tradition and envision what our city and the great state of Michigan will look like by 2050. This evening, we are privileged to be joined by a panel of extraordinary thought leaders, visionaries who are at the forefront of shaping Detroit's future. Each of our panelists brings a wealth of experience and insight to this discussion. We have Eric Larson, the CEO of Downtown Detroit Partnership, whose work has been instrumental in driving community investment and fostering a vibrant, inclusive urban environment. Welcome. Please give him a hand. We also have Kiana Wenzel, the co-executive director of Design Core Detroit. She is a guiding force behind Detroit's Month of Design and an advocate for design as a powerful tool for community building. Give it up for her, please. And of course, a gentleman that I see every day at Boris Deck, our very, I say this in a nice way. Okay, so I have to go back. Of Florence Technological University. We're very proud of you. You will get a call from the investment office, right? Anyway, and of course our third panelist, my good friend and colleague, and our very own Lawrence Tex, Dean of the College of Architecture and Design, and also our University Distinguished Professor of Architecture, Carl Doppler. Carl's innovative thinking and leadership have positioned our institution at the cutting edge of architectural education and practice, and we are very proud of the great work that he and his team are doing at COED at LTU. In addition to being joined by our extraordinary panelists, we are privileged to be hosting tonight's event in this extraordinary space, the Constructing Future exhibition here at the 1001 Woodward Building. This installation was curated and constructed by Dean Bubman and LTU Professor Sarah Kuderin in partnership with Bedrock and the Urban Tech Exchange. The exhibit itself could not have been possible without the support of our generous sponsors, and this evening in particular, without the support of Castel Spaces and AIA Detroit. Let's take a moment to thank them for their sponsorship. At Lawrence Technological University, we believe in the transformative power of education, creativity, and technological advancement. Our university has a proud history spanning 92 years, during which we have consistently been at the forefront of fostering industry leaders and transformative professionals. Our motto, theory and practice, true for 92 years, isn't just a guiding principle. It's a way of life for our students, faculty, and staff. We emphasize technological eminence, research and creative practice, industry immersion, interdisciplinary agility, and professional excellence in all our programming. Our commitment to these values have helped shape not just the minds of our students and alumni, but also the future of industries and communities around the world. Tonight's discussion embodies this spirit. We will delve into the unknown, imagining the ways in which design, technology, and community will intersect to shape Detroit's future. From the iconic Art Deco architecture that marks our past, to the possibilities that artificial intelligence and cutting-edge technology hold for our future. We are here to explore how Detroit can remain a city that not only adapts, but leads. This event is more than just a conversation. It's a celebration of Detroit's vibrant present and an optimistic look towards its future. It's a testament to the ingenuity, creativity, and collaborative spirit that make Detroit and Lawrence Technological University truly exceptional. Our students, faculty, and staff at LTU are not just participants in this dialogue, they are the innovators who will carry forward this vision and legacy, using their talents to shape a future that is not just future-proof, but also future-inspiring. As we embark on this journey tonight, let us be reminded that the future is not a distant horizon. It is being built here and now, in moments like this, by people like you. Let us imagine, let us innovate, let us inspire a future that is as bold, beautiful, and dynamic as this wonderful city that we all call our home. Thank you all for being here tonight. It is now my great pleasure to introduce my good friend and our moderator for this evening, Ed Clement. Ed is currently working as Senior Advisor for Transit Development with the Michigan Economic Development Corporation. Prior to this role, he was appointed to 2 terms as a Michigan Liquor Control Commission. Proudly served as a state rep, co-founded the Michigan Energy Innovative Business Council, and he's held the positions of Wayne County Community College Trustee and President of the Southern Wayne County Chamber of Commerce. You may recognize him as the current host of the Michigan Opportunity podcast. Ed will guide us through what I'm sure will be a compelling and enlightening discussion tonight. Ladies and gentlemen, Ed Clement.
Thanks. I want to thank everybody for coming tonight. I want to thank Dr. President, and also for Lawrence Tech, Chris and Stephanie too, who are here, have been very helpful in making this possible tonight. And so with that, let me just give you sort of a tone for the discussion, because you will notice that all 3 of our guests are actually not like experts in architecture, probably just one is doing the most. Yeah, I gotta be careful because I get in trouble early on usually, but that helps. But usually, what I wanted to mention is like, why are we here in the first place? And I just want to understand that one of my favorite books is called, maybe somebody read it, called The Geography of Genius. And it was written by a reporter actually for the New York Times, but he wrote this book and he tried to discover what created genius at different epic times in history. So, for example, like Vienna with music, or entrepreneurship actually in Hangzhou, which is outside of in China by Shanghai, I believe. And then there's also things like of course I'm Italian, so Florence and the Renaissance, and just why did all of a sudden, in Athens, of course, but why did all of a sudden, for like a period of 20 years, did a bunch of brilliance happen? And so he tries to do a thing, as you all know, between art and science. So is there really a script that these places became careful? And that's what he does, and it's actually kind of a humorous book. It's not very scientific, but it's a really enjoyable read. But the key thing, I think, to all of it is he says, cities are where ideas go to have sex. And so that's what he thought was really drove it. And I think every one of the 3 panelists here know and have been to a lot of cities, probably internationally, but it's the combination of people of different things bumping into each other, sort of that spontaneous combustion, that really is what he's trying to say. And in fact, one of my favorite things, it goes, almost everyone that was really interesting walked every day, just to clear their head out or to walk with other people. So it's a really interesting book. So the reason too is that what I do, why am I focused on the future, especially in my age bracket, right? So it started out, I guess as a kid, when I read a ton of science fiction, and I just was in love with everything, everything from movies, of course, Terminator. But what was going to happen in the future. And so I actually talked the governor Whitmer into creating this podcast that I do, which is on future trends. And it's a lot of other things, but mainly it's looking like Quentin Messer, the head of the NBC, calls me like in-house futurist, but it's not a title you want, because it means you assume you're going to make the right decisions. And really, I think what a futurist or a trend person is giving you as many options. It's kind of like chess more, or maybe 3D chess if you're a Star Trek guy. So, but like, what are all the different variables that could happen? What things can't you predict? And usually you can't predict the future. And so, why we bring a different panel here is to get that sort of spontaneous combustion combined in one panel. And then when I started hearing all the stuff about the COP20, which is, you know, the United Nations trying to, you know, sustainability for the future, and almost every country was saying 2050, 2050. And as a former legislator, I kept saying, well, what is Michigan doing, or what is the state doing, or what are you doing as a plan? And my experience of working in almost every sector, private sector, public sector, nonprofits, higher education, media now, none of them are really good on their own. They really need that holistic approach to say, what are our best odds of not screwing up, right? And because it's hard to say what the future is going to be like, but that's sort of what this is for today. And one other book I'll mention, just because it's a very nerdy book, but I would recommend it. It's called What We Owe the Future. And two terms you might want to look at when you leave here on your own. You don't want them talking or they're talking. But one's called, it's an actual, you can find a wiki site for it, it's called Effective Altruism. And this guy's a principal, the guy that wrote the book, William, he's a Scottish guy. But like, and the other thing is long-termism. So what is our legacy and what do we owe the future? And that's kind of, I want to know where we're going to be in 30 or 40, 50 years from now. And then I think every year you should be thinking, well, what are we doing for the next 30? So it just doesn't stop at 2050. So with that, it's kind of like I said, the podcast is about, and how do we blend this into all the different things? And we'll give you through a variety of different questions. So let me start out, and this is the one I told you about your index cards. I hope you all have them, but you got them on work. So I'm going to ask the panel to each give 2 examples. One is, what is your favorite structure in the Metro Detroit area? Maybe Detroit, and for Eric's purposes, downtown. We probably want you to pick one downtown.
Absolutely downtown.
Yes, and I say structure because it could be the fist, it could be anything, whatever you'd like. It could be an artwork. But, and the second question is, what is one city either you want to visit internationally that you think would be a good city for maybe us that Detroit could model a little bit, or a specific thing you want to go visit? That's a lot of homework. So we're going to ask these questions first, and I'll just do them as they're sitting, but Carl, I'll let you give your 2 first.
Try this.
It should be on there. Is there a light on?
We'll see. Yeah. It's better than yours, I think.
Yeah. I thought it was better, so
City, no, structure downtown. I think one of the structures that I like, I mean, there's so many, but I think also some of the other prompts that you had for tonight was a way, probably infected some of what I was thinking. I really like the Michigan Theater, right? Which is a moment where there's kind of old and new, a clash between, you know, and it's always been held up as a kind of problematic thing, a kind of ruin. But I think as we think about new technologies and as we continue the conversation tonight, I think so much of that's predicated on mixing old and new. And that's one instance that just seems kind of otherworldly. If anyone doesn't know it, just down the street, there's everyone knows it. Okay, fine.
You didn't give your international, but we'll go through, we'll go back.
I would say that my favorite structure in Detroit is the North Rosedale Park Community House. So North Rosedale Park is a historic neighborhood on the west side of Detroit. And in the center of all the homes is a community house that's for all of the residents. And when I was growing up in Rosedale, it really served as a place to like meet your neighbors, to commune. It reminds me of like the campus marshes of a residential neighborhood. You know, they had a kitchen there. It was like a community kitchen. We would have plays. There would be concerts. There were parades. And so it was like a really special place, and we need those places in Detroit now and in the future, and that's why I picked the community house.
Love that. Of course we did. So I'm not going to use campus marches, even though that would be one. I don't know whether it's a horizontal structure, but a couple things. One, selfishly, I absolutely love One Detroit Center, the Allied Building. It's the last high-rise that I did with Hines, Dr. D. Philip Johnson. It's the last design that they did together as a partnership, and so that selfishly is something that is near and dear to me. But I think based on your comments, I would pick the Guardian Building. I think the Guardian Building is one of the best representations of the quality and character of architecture that we've been able to preserve. And it is awe-inspiring in terms of our ability to leverage that for the future, and not just for the next 2050, but for that 2051, 2052. So I would say the Guardian Building. And then going backwards, probably Barcelona, because I think we can learn. I think we can learn a lot from any place that we go, quite honestly. But I do think there is an amazing blend that is happening in Barcelona that is taking sort of the best of what's happening currently with making sure that they're holding on to their history, their legacy, and their architectural importance. And so, again, I think there are tons of different examples around the world. It's one of the reasons why travel is so critical, because if we don't leave, we don't know what we can bring back. But I would say Barcelona.
I guess you want the over-tourism too, right?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, Barcelona's a good one. I would say Toronto. I really, like Toronto, it reminds me a lot of Detroit in some ways with the waterfront, the street grids. I like how they use their old distillery district for some adaptive reuse art projects. So Toronto is a great city.
For me, it has to be Rome. And again, a moment where there's so much overlap between old and new, and we take students there each year during spring break to do exactly what you said, help give them some perspective on things. And I think it's an amazing model given Detroit and that kind of resurgence, nature, technology, other types of things happening.
Yeah, it is interesting too that, like for a while, Berlin was really modeling themselves after us. And we'll talk about that a little bit more, but it is interesting who models us and how we're doing things.
Well, that and vice versa. You might remember the silos, the cement silos on the river.
On the river.
We were modeling Berlin because they had turned them into outdoor adventure, structures. So yeah.
So the next thing I'm going to ask them, and I guess Carl, you go first again, but or it doesn't matter. Whoever has don't let me take control. I don't need control, don't worry. But why don't you give us sort of an overview of what you do, and then I asked you to do a couple other things on top of that too.
Sure. My name is Kiana Lenzel. I am the co-executive director of Design Core Detroit, which is the organization that produces the Detroit Month of Design. We are also the stewards of Detroit's UNESCO City of Design designation. We launched in 2010 with the mission of continuing to establish Detroit as a globally recognized, valued, and respected creative capital. So a lot of our work evolves around growing, retaining, and attracting creative businesses, visitors, and residents to our city.
And sorry about that, I had to do some homework there. So why don't we pass it whichever one you want?
Okay.
What are we doing?
So just to explain what you're doing, and why don't you explain this, and then ask you to explain this actually.
So I'm the Dean of the College of Architecture and Design at Lawrence Tech, and together with Sarah, who's in the front row, we've been working with Bedrock for probably 3-4 months, imagining what could happen in this space for Month of Design. And you can also, the difficulty for us was that this is an amazing space, windows on 3 sides, incredibly tall. How to put something in this space to make it feel like something could happen within here, that it could be occupied. And so it's a little bit of a mix, again, that I'll continue the theme of old and new, using technology, but using kind of very standard materials and very standard parts. That in a very short time, we built everything that you see in the space in a matter of a couple of weeks. And so we really wanted to make a space to be able to do something like this, a space to gather, as well as the ability to be able to exhibit work here.
And why don't you just touch on real quick about the robotics side of this, because I think that's pretty, when you walk around, you'll see some lines up.
There's some hints of some other things that have happened, and so we wanted to highlight some other technologies around the future of construction. So the AI images that are around the perimeter were a series of prompts. We have about 500 images from about 70 designers from 22 different countries, imagining what the future of construction might be. And then it was the realization that maybe we should demonstrate some of these things. So there's two things that I'll point to. One, on the bottom image, on the bottom row of images over on the side, is a small robot the size of a toaster. We gave our digital file to Nord Technologies. They loaded that into the robot, and the robot drove over the space and printed the locations of the walls for us. And so all of the walls were prefabricated. We brought them in and we located them on those lines. And so you can see the kind of cyan blue lines that are on the floor. And then there's also on the other side behind the bars a 3D printer. And so we're also looking at the ability to think about 3D printing with concrete and what that might be for the future of construction.
Where you got your cheese and shrimp, that was all prefab. The bars, if you look at the bottom, you see that was 3D printed out. That's right. All right, good. That's done.
So, as already has been said, Eric Larson with the Downtown Detroit Partnership. I also have Emma and David and Alyssa there with us. We're packing the audience. But so the Downtown Detroit Partnership has been in existence for over 100 years. Our focus is really on making sure that we're stewarding the downtown. We sort of evolve with the changing needs of the downtown and the greater downtown. Our focus is not just on public spaces, but it is really focused on driving economic development. Tariq and Ed, I'm a little concerned that I've already underwhelmed this group because sitting up here with these two, I'm just a lowly nonprofit worker. But my career did start in the real estate business. I was with Hines for 15 years and then spent time on my own with my own firm, and then did the LCA arena with the Illich organization, and then came over to Bedrock to help start up Bedrock. And again, couldn't keep any of those jobs, so now I'm with the partnership and I'm loving what I'm doing. But our principal focus, quite honestly, is quite a bit like what Design Core does, and that's to make sure that we're creating an environment that not only is sticky enough to keep the people that are here, but attract people from outside. And we've been doing a reasonably good job with a lot of partners and a lot of key stakeholders. The level of investment, in fact, I just finished a panel conversation on a couple of our key things. We've got over $2.7 billion of current investment in the greater downtown. That doesn't include the $3.3 billion that Henry Ford is making just up the street. We have over 54 projects that are underway, either in construction or in the pipeline. So a lot of activity that we focus on trying to make sure continues to be both relevant as well as attractive. The other piece, though, is really making sure that the downtown is welcoming to all, and that's a big part of obviously what we do through the public spaces and through our programming. But it also is thinking about good policy. We're currently working on I-375 and I-75, the boulevarding of I-375, which is a very, very challenging discussion. It has a lot of different opinions as to what is the best alternative, and then obviously capping I-75, which is the use of technology that is now being applied around the country. So great to meet you.
Yeah, let's, I'm gonna maybe get back to maybe something Kian said is her favorite building, but all of you can answer the question, but how can like AI or robotics help improve historical buildings or to kind of complement them? Or, I mean, when I go to other cities in Europe, you'll see they preserve the same architecture for new buildings, or maybe they'll just keep a front of something. So, go ahead.
I just took a fabulous tour with Cezanne Charles yesterday of Michigan Central. And one thing that really stood out to me when it came to technology and historic preservation is the ability to take just a small piece, a cornice or a pediment, and 3D scan it in order to make replicable molds. So you can rebuild and restore some of these historic buildings to their original glory, okay? And Michigan Central is a fabulous example of that, and where you have a historic structure combining that with advanced technology to, create what you have today. Now, when you look at Book Tower, it was a similarly older structure, historic, but it was renovated in a different way. It's a little bit more modernized. And the team that did Michigan Central could have done something similar, like, oh, we're not gonna recreate every tile, every piece. We're gonna add some glass, we're gonna add some steel. So it really depends on, what you want and that end goal. When we talk about historic preservation and be able, instead of tearing a building down, being able to preserve it in a way that is affordable, that can help you with your timeline and efficiency, or if you're building a new structure, maybe your pre-scanning elements that can be used for future use. So I just use that example because I took the tour yesterday and I see this on, so.
Go ahead, you can, go ahead.
Okay.
Yeah, I think there's a similar thing for me. I think thinking about maybe the history of Detroit a little bit and going all the way back to you can have a Model T in any color you want as long as it's black, right? Sets up this notion with mass production that doing the same thing over and over again is the most expedient or the most efficient way to do that. And I think new technologies allow us to look at the ability to customize these things. And so I think there's an expectation when we think about maybe what we wear, the way that we use other technologies or other tools, that they're customized for us. And I think the opportunity is with architecture to think about whether that's with housing and being both affordable, but also bringing a certain amount of dignity to what you're doing, because that house is custom designed for what you're doing, and it's catered to the specific site that you're on, rather than thinking about the same thing over and over again. As well as, I think Kiana makes a great point about just being able, we have so many existing buildings within Detroit, and rather than tear them down, we have a huge problem with all of these things, all the materials ending up in the landfill. How do we maybe scan those, reclaim those, and redeploy them in new and interesting ways as well, if a structure can't be saved? And so I think these technologies allow us to do this way in maybe new ways, smart ways, effective and efficient ways.
And I would add one more thing to that. When it comes to the construction industry and the environment, coming up with new materials. We have a lot of artists during the festival this year that are making materials from recycled plastics, a pin felting machine, Isaac taking scraps from garments and making new fabrics out of it, whether it's for industrial use. And so that's really helping to, be less harmful to our climate and our environment.
Yeah, I think from the partnership perspective, it's a little different because we're really leveraging technology, one, mostly to engage people both locally as well as internationally. It's engaging people on what does Detroit look like now, what does Detroit need. We can access people's information and perspectives and ideas much more efficiently through technology. It's not necessarily, obviously, 3D printing an idea specifically, but it does allow us a different way to engage. The other thing that we're doing, and David Cowan, who is here, that runs all of our public spaces, we're in the process of doing a second phase of Capitol Park. One of the conversations we're having with artistic design is transforming today's faces and voices onto what are historic statues. And so again, using technology to try and make the infrastructure of downtown much more current and quite frankly much more inclusive and representative of where the city is going. So lots of different ways to use technology. I also happen to sit on a board of a prefab home designer called Fluxus. It is intended to do exactly what is being said. It's really thinking about how not only can they continue to build and develop advanced materials for the housing, in this case the housing industry, but also how can they leverage a place like Detroit, which has excess land and can allow for production within the city limits that is then in effect just-in-time delivery. So much more efficient delivery models as well that can be created through some of this technology.
Were you going to add something? No, I thought, yeah.
Yeah, I can add something. Actually, I was thinking of, now, when we talk about articulating an idea or your vision, with these tools that makes it easier to like render like all the images that we see alongside, you as a designer, you can have an idea in your mind. I'm like, Carl, I have an idea and I'm saying it, but if I drew it, you could really understand better what I'm trying to say. And so I think some of these tools also help you to better articulate to your team or to your investors what you envision that's in your mind, and how can I get that out and share it with other people and make it easier, especially for young people that may not have the software tools to be able to sketch or illustrate the visions that they are working to articulate.
The next thing I wanted to, this is more up my alley, I work at the MEDC, of course, but so how can architecture sort of be sort of the hot sauce that brings new economic development to the city? Like, is there ways that you can make the buildings more attractive? Because I know everything since COVID changed a little bit. So, you know, like in New York, I keep hearing how they're freaking out because so many of their buildings were built in the 60s that everything's kind of centrally the bathrooms, and they're having a lot of problems trying to convert unused office space to living space, you know. So if you, I'll go with you.
Yeah, I mean, and so Ed, a couple of things, and I'll answer it more from an economic development perspective and something that the partnership has really been focused on, making sure we're encouraging. So we've already redeveloped over 27 of the older buildings in the downtown. They've been repositioned from what was the old style of office into hospitality and residential, because the quarter curtain wall, the operable windows, you know, the floor plates, the distribution, all of that works extremely well for residential hospitality. It doesn't work as well, obviously, for today's office demands, and it's just not as efficient because people are looking for larger floor plates. So we in Detroit have had a huge advantage over a number of other communities because we didn't have the run-on development and the opportunity for developers to come in and bulldoze what was here. Instead, we had a lot of buildings that unfortunately sat at vacant or were just sort of, you know, mothballed. But today, that is a massive benefit. It also comes with some tax advantages because all of those buildings are historic, so they qualify for historic tax credits, both state and federal. So it makes it the equation of redeveloping much more attractive, and I think it's an area that Detroit obviously continues to have a leg up on. The other piece, I think, is we are seeing now additional great design. Detroit has always been known for incredible architecture. We've had great architectural firms, and we've had great architectural execution. We're now seeing some of that come back, not just the local architecture talent that we have, which is very deep, but, you know, shop architect to come to Detroit to do the Hudsons, you know, John Riggy, Philip Johnson. I mean, there are now architectural opportunities that will sort of be that next generation of the skyline that people have come back to Detroit on a regular basis for. So I think it's a both and, as opposed to an either or, and Detroit is very uniquely positioned to capitalize on it.
You don't have to. Okay. So the thing too is with Detroit, and this is sort of on the other side of that coin that we touched on it, is how can architecture be attractive for talent? So as we struggle to, you know, it's like a global market, right? A friend of mine always says there's been a war on talent and talent won, right? And so how do you build sort of that essence of where people want to move, work, and play? You know? So, Carl, you want to take a shot?
I should probably answer the first one. Yeah, I can answer this one. But, I think there is an aspect of just thinking about that mix, right, and how we live in the city. I think there's, I mean, you're positioning architecture in a way for that, and maybe it sponsors a lot of these things, but I think the ability to live and play and do all sorts of different things in the city. And it's amazing, like I live in Midtown, and if I work from home on Friday, I park my car on Thursday night, and I don't get back in my car until Monday morning, right? And so in that kind of neighborhood, so we can think about kind of the scale of the street, the scale of the buildings, the scale of the neighborhoods, what we can do in that period of time. And I think that breeds, at least talking with young, talented people, it's like building that kind of, and maybe you talked about it earlier in the city, right? That ability where different ideas collide, the ability to be with people who share similar ideas about trying to advance some of those things. And so I think it's a mix between the buildings that are there, but also who we bring. I think the UNESCO designation was an aspect for me about thinking about coming back to the city as well and being part of that. And so I think more of those things that we do, the more it will attract more of that talent. And it just feels like it builds momentum and then it keeps going.
Yeah, and I'm gonna, from an economic development perspective, like when you read that book, The Geography of Genius, he actually is not that excited about what Silicon Valley is. He doesn't really consider Silicon Valley a geography of genius because good examples like when COVID, that how many people could work remotely, for example, and how it affect. I remember Twitter, when it was still Twitter, when it was building $1 billion building downtown San Francisco, and they had about 1/3 of the cost into it. And once COVID hit, they made the decision not to build the other 2/3 and create a digital policy for nomads for the staff. And so that's another kind of competitive thing that didn't exist 5 years ago. Before COVID, you wouldn't have thought about, you know, how many people really have, we're now in the 3-day work week, maybe, I don't know. But, so I don't know, one of you, I just want to mention that, but go ahead.
That just makes me think design for adaptation. You know, you build a building for an original use, and if you're only building it for that one use and not thinking about, you know, what if this building's not always used this way, the real change, like COVID. You know, I think designers are thinking differently now for new construction or even some adaptive reuse projects is, what's the life cycle of this building if it goes through many different stages?
No, I'd agree with that. And I do think, again, back to the point about the city being really designed from the street all the way up. But if you're designing from 8 to 80, you're going to cover everybody. And that's really our focus, is making sure that we're designing spaces, whether they be outdoor spaces or indoor spaces, that do have that flexibility. If you look at the new product that's coming online, especially in the core of the downtown, it is all a mixed-use product. It may have a component of office, it may have a component of hospitality, it may have a component of entertainment. But the reality is, it is all mixed use, and it is all based on the ability to move in and out of the buildings very easily, in the way that the buildings then relate to the neighboring buildings, parks, and so forth. And that, I do think, is a trend that will continue to be very, very beneficial, not just to the city of Detroit, but to architectural design in general. It is becoming less and less, and that's not exclusive. I mean, Salesforce will go to San Francisco and build a tower for their office, or Twitter X. But the reality is, most of the product is really turning to a much more mix of uses. The other thing is, I mean, when Dan Gilbert moved down in 2010 with 250,000 square feet and 16,000 people, and now has over 110 buildings and 18,000 people working in the downtown. It was all on the premise that people and the employment that he was trying to attract would want to be in an urban core. They want the walkability they want. And what's happened during COVID and this work from home and the whole ability to flex work is they're still coming down. They just happen to be sitting in our park using our free Wi-Fi and doing the same thing. They like being in the heart of something that actually has activity, connectivity, and the ability to just have that spontaneous combustion.
I'm also thinking that Detroit has a little bit, or it feels like it has a little bit of a sense that we're like all in on one thing and then different things. So if I look at the kind of urban sense of Detroit, I think there are 6 or 9 highway interchanges within the boundary of Detroit, right? So there was an idea highways would solve all these problems. They didn't, right? And now we're undoing some of that. Then I look at a kind of another layer of the city, like somehow casinos were going to solve all of our problems, right? There's a whole bunch of big casinos. That didn't work. Then it's stadiums, right? Then the stadiums get activated a few times a year. It's great, but then they go dormant the other time. And so I think it's that mix, maybe at a much finer scale. But Detroit's always had these huge, ambitious plans for things, and we do it, and we go all in, and then we undo it, right? Or we rethink some of those things. And so maybe it's that kind of moderation or that kind of scale as a way to think about some of that.
Yeah, I think that's right. And just how, even with, to your point, even with those that have already, been delivered, how do we now start to link those and build off of those? Because, hopefully they're not going. So Ford Field is a perfect example. Ford Field is 20 years old, and in stadium years, it's getting to the end, end of its useful life. That's crazy to think about, but the reality is in the entertainment business at that scale it is. They also have a practice facility that is also 20 years in Allen Park. So is there a way to not abandon Ford Field, but actually, again, have that, yes and? And so one of the things that we're looking at 375 is a great example. Can you change the road network so that it accommodates that connectivity, that ability, whether it's through Eastern Market or back to the entertainment district or then up to the north where so much of the innovation is being developed. So again, I think we've been working with Tool traffic engineers on 375, and it's been really fun because they started by challenging us to return all of the road networks in downtown Detroit to the street grid. Now, that probably isn't going to happen, but the reality is if you disperse the traffic through a normal street grid in a short distance, you really are not impacting the commute times all that much, and we have a heck of a lot more pleasant mobility and walkability of the city. So we're pushing that envelope in partnership with our partners, but again, we got to continue to do a better job of connecting and diversifying.
So on the talent thing, just a couple more things. I work for Hillary Doe, who is the Chief Growth Officer for the state of Michigan. First one ever, I think, in the country. And, but when you really look at the map of the United States, there's only about 6 or 7 states that are really growing. A lot of states, like Connecticut, has never changed its population, and it's doing okay. So it's really trying to figure out, and this gets to a book that Eric and I talked about, 21 Lessons for the 21st Century, where basically the author identifies 3 jobs in the future, and one is people who do like plumbing, electricians, hands-on. The other one's going to be more information, management, leadership. And the third one is the people who don't know their jobs are going to disappear. And so that is like, people don't know who those jobs are going to be, but AI, just in this last 2 weeks, Silicon Valley laid off like 15,000 coders. I can't remember if it was just coders, but that's actually that could be a windfall for a place like Detroit and Michigan, because these people probably want to get out of really expensive homes and move to the Midwest, where it's much more affordable to live and raise a family at times. But we'll see what happens with that as it plays out. This next question was sort of inspired somewhat by Eric, so I'll let you keep the microphone. But even, you were sort of joking and you picked Barcelona, but like, how would Detroit become more of a tourist destination? Because I know you were very intimately involved with the draft. And to have that many people come here, must have been a huge learning exercise as well as a prep exercise.
Yeah, no, it was a huge. So first off, back to your original comment. One of my favorite quotes is, if you don't like change, you're going to like irrelevance a lot less. And I think that's a lot about, really, quite honestly, a lot about where we're headed. Is if you don't really keep up and you don't keep thinking about what ultimately we're evolving to and grow, we are all going to become irrelevant. So I love that quote. But the ability to make Detroit, continue to make Detroit a destination is a lot about everything that we're talking about. You should actually have this mic, because a lot of it is really truly continuing to demonstrate to the world that Detroit is a place that is very interesting to be. It is a living laboratory, so you come here, your voice can be heard, you actually can engage in a way that is much more meaningful, much more organic, and much more original than most large metropolitan areas. And that's a unique aspect of Detroit that we need to continue to embrace. We can test things here without feeling ashamed if it doesn't work. That many places you just wouldn't. So I think that's part of it. The other piece is we have to, no pun intended, we have to draft off some of these larger events. I mean, our experience at the draft was very, very helpful. We understood not only what that size of crowd needed, but also how we could leverage our public spaces and our entire downtown to be part of the fabric, part of the background, part of the stage of this huge venue. We would never have been able to accommodate all 775,000 people if we hadn't used all of our public spaces, Woodward Avenue, all the way up to Grand Circus. It would never have worked. And it wasn't something that the NFL had ever done before. They had never ever allowed it outside of the draft proper footprint. The draft proper footprint only accommodates max 60,000 people. So if we had 775,000 people rushing down on downtown Detroit, and all we had was a boundary that was filled by the time we got down here, it would have been a horrible experience. So learning from that is a big part of it. And then last, I would just say, I think Hillary constantly is telling me, forget the jobs, just create the experience. I think that's about accurate. And I think that, I'm going to pass the mic, because I think a lot of what we're doing is creating experiences.
I agree. I think we have to own our story in Detroit, to get more people here. I say that Detroit has a prolific past, but an even more relevant future. Because we've been talking about for a long time, Detroit during the automotive days, during this, during that. Now, Detroit is like a space for innovation. The Detroit Month of Design is creating conditions for like radical collaborations to happen. Detroit is a place, when you talk about experience in Detroit, I love to have visitors because you have to be here. You can read about it, but you have to be here and like feel Detroit. You can make it in Detroit and you can make it in Detroit, And so through the Detroit Month of Design is a strategy. It's a strategy for business development. Because we are a creative city, not just in one sector, not just the automotive sector, but furniture, advertising, fashion. And so we really need to retell our story in a way that's positioning our legacy and our future as a competitive advantage. So yes, Detroit has a legacy, but it has a future that you want to be a part of. And you better get in now, because these are all the relationships are being made now. Don't wait. And so I'm meeting so many people from around the world coming here, and being a part of the UNESCO Creative Cities Network is a way for Detroit to tell our story locally, nationally, and internationally, and say, oh wow, you guys are doing some amazing things. We have natural assets, water, trees, grass, space, and we have advanced technologies. So you have the best of both worlds. You can make it here, your family, and you can manufacture, make it here.
Also, I want to thank you for answering question number 10.
Oh, great.
And Carl, go ahead.
What else is there? No.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to put pressure on you, sorry.
No, but I agree. I think the aspect of making it is something. I think back to the earlier question about what would attract the talent. It's having the freedom to do some of that. And whenever I talk about design, it always comes with kind of a gesture, which is like, you need some space. And whether that's actual space to be able to make something and do something, or just a lack of constraints. And I think I have colleagues in other cities where it costs so much to do something, it's so constrained in other ways. Like, we can make these things. There's a long history of this, but also we have that space to collaborate. I think also when it comes, we're so focused on technology, and it's valuable, and it seems to be the thing that drives everything. But artists and designers, as those that begin to collaborate, ask really weird questions. And it's those weird questions that challenge technology to do new things, right? And to stretch beyond those boundaries. And so I think you could take a technology from somewhere else and bring it here, and we should deploy it in a slightly different way that makes it unique to Detroit. It's a hub, and people come to Detroit to see what's happening here for a month of design and other types of things. I think what would they see? I don't know. Hopefully, a mix of those things. I think there's an accessible scale. It's a uniquely sized American city. I think there's an incredible history, and then hopefully these things being deployed in other ways. And I guess the other two technology quotes that I would add tonight would be, one is that technology is here, but it's just not evenly distributed, right? It's in pockets and it's in other ways. And the other is that technology is a human accelerant, right? So whatever we're doing as humanity, we might be able to do that more or faster or better or in slightly different ways. And so I'm always trying to leverage technology from a transformative perspective. And so it's like, here's a current condition, here's what I don't like about that, and then use the technology to change that. And so hopefully, whatever that might be, and maybe the last thing I'd say is just back to your point about AI, the images that we see around the exhibition, I think for me, there's the potential that it democratizes a sense of ideas. And what we wanted to do was open up that discussion, whether it be the future of construction, last year we talked about the future of mobility, and whether that be the future of Detroit, that it gives more people voices to give a vision to that. And I think we've always suffered from maybe a lack of a vision. There's plenty of ideas, but being able to articulate what that might look like might build more momentum around that and push that forward.
Well, you know, when I was in the legislature, that was always an issue, is that most of the people in the legislature had college degrees. But the reality is, a lot of people do not in America. And so most of the time, even panels like this, you know, we're all, presumably, I don't know, but like, we sometimes forget of, my district was a pure blue collar, lower middle class, poor district. And a lot of things that people would talk about, say, Faith from Oakland County or different districts, did not relate at all to the people in my district. And so I think that's tying into what you're saying, how do we raise all the votes, right? And so anyway, I'll let you know.
You know, community, that's what we're building here. And I hope in, 30 years from now, 2030, 2050, people get off the bus, they're like, wow, this city, I'm seeing the full spectrum of society thriving in Detroit. I see people from all walks of life living a quality life in Detroit. You know, Design for we envision a future where everyone can embrace creative tools. So you were saying, is it Wakanda, is it Blade Runner, is it this? I would say it's a mix of all three of those. We want to see all three of those groups integrated, harmonizing, and we want people to know that Detroit is an inclusive city. No matter who you are, no matter where you're coming from, we welcome you, we want you to be a part of our community, and we want to build our future together. We're about grow Michigan together. It's not going to be one person, one company, one organization that's going to transform this region. It's going to be everybody working together, and that's why our call to action for the UNESCO City of Design designation is a focus on inclusive design. Our design process. How are we designing? Are we getting voices along the way through this process to say, hey, this is the direction that we're thinking of going in. What do you think about that, Eric? I hear your opinion. Oh, okay. Carl, what are your thoughts? And being open to adjusting your vision based on what you're hearing from other people to have a future that's going to be more welcoming for all. So I hope people get on that bus, they see a little bit of themselves in everyone, and some new people, and everyone thriving. Flying bus.
So, I think obviously 50 years from now, I really do hope all of that. I think that people will come and see a city that has embraced its culture, that has protected its culture, that has invested in its culture, and I mean that in brick and mortar as well as in its communities. And I think you'll see a city that has actually been embraced by individuals and populations from around the world. So to me, I think Detroit will continue to be a very diverse population, and I think it will have a very diverse set of experiences. We have a city that has significant opportunity to try a lot of different things. We have a lot of vacant land that holds very interesting opportunities. In the downtown alone, we have over 200 undeveloped acres of property. 375 is going to add another 30 acres. What we need to do is think about how we're leveraging these kinds of things throughout the city. And so for me, in 50 years, I believe people will arrive in Detroit. They will see all the things that have been said, but most importantly, they'll see a city that has embraced, invested, and protected its culture.
And and I just add to the future, actually in a unique way, there's a lot of things going on, and I know Eric probably could have mentioned it, but beyond, like, say, heading Tech Town or, Wayne State, but you've also got these other things on the horizon, like what Henry Ford and MSU are doing, what the U of M new center is going to be. I don't know the official name of it. And you want to come up?
No, they're just making a comment that LTU is part of I don't know whether you're getting paid or not, but then, but no, you're right. But it is true. It is very true because between Michigan Central, what is happening with U of M and the Innovation Center, with LTU, MSU, Henry Ford, Shirley Ryan, the Apple coding, you can go on and on and on with what is happening, and I do think that's going to be a big part of the innovation and knowledge.
So where's the Lawrence Tech building going downtown?
Randolph Career Technical Center.
Well, anyway, I could read some of these off, but I think I know, Eric, you gotta go, and I thought you had to go somewhere. Are you good now? I'll read a couple of them. Somewhat, and I don't know this, the Alfred Taubman Center.
Yeah, so the old CCM.
Oh, yeah, the Argo building. The Argo building, yeah. I did some legislation. The Gar building, which I think is better than the Flatiron building. I know there's New York lovers here in the audience, but our Gar building's pretty nice. I think it's gonna become a hotel, isn't it?
I don't think it's a hotel, but Sexy Safe, to keep on your feet, is the restaurant in the basement.
Okay. And someone would go to Dubrovnik, Croatia. Another person did pick Barcelona, Beijing, and let's see. Oh, I don't think anyone else picked this one, but my favorite building actually was going to be the parking lot. Because I used to go to concerts right in bed. And I always take people there just to go see that parking lot all the time. Favorite international building, probably none of you know, is Calakmul, which is in Mexico, actually. And it's close to the border with Guatemala, but in Belize, but it's a really amazing site. Anyway, with that, I want to thank all of our panelists for taking time to do this, and I appreciate everybody coming out tonight. Thank you, Tariq. I appreciate you doing all this work for us and putting this on. I want to thank Chris again, and there you are, thank you. And we appreciate everything. So anyway, thank you very much for all of this.